Hi kids, Pastor Josh here again, and I got a story for you just like I said. Now be sure to pay attention though, because this one's a doozy. Now our story begins with Jesus talking to three of his disciples, Peter, James, and John, his honor students, if you will. These are the disciples that Jesus kind of singled out for special teaching because they're the ones that seem to understand it a little better. So Jesus has a different teaching style with these three compared to when he's with all 12 disciples at once. Now, Jesus and these three disciples are on the top of a mountain. And Jesus is trying to teach them what to expect in the coming days, because Jesus knows that it's not going to be too much longer before he dies. It's not going to be too much longer before he's crucified. He's trying to prepare these three, his top students, for what's going to come next, for what will happen both when he's crucified and especially what happens after. But the thing is, they're just not getting it. They might be his brightest students, but that doesn't mean they always understood what it was he was trying to teach them. The fact is, at this particular time, they were in danger of falling asleep in class. But that's when something really amazing happened. Right in front of them, Jesus changed. And out of nowhere, he starts to shine. Now, he doesn't just start to glow like some sort of nightlight here, kids. He shines like a star. It's almost as if the sun has come down out of the sky and turned into Jesus. I mean, he's so bright they can just barely look at him. And to top it all off, his clothes become white. Whiter than it's even possible to bleach. And then just after they finish marveling at this, they realize that Jesus isn't alone. There are two men with him. Men that they recognize and have looked up to since they were little boys. Heroes of the Jewish people. Moses and Elijah. Now, for those of you who don't remember, Moses was the first prophet. He was the guy that God had charged with bringing his people out of slavery in Egypt, and then he gave Moses the law. His law of what he wanted the people to do and how he wanted them to live so that they weren't trapped in their sins anymore. And Elijah, he might not have been the first prophet, but he was kind of the definition of a prophet. Because he's the one that God sent to call his people back to him after they'd turned their backs on him. He went so far as to challenge the wicked king of his day to a contest that proved that God was the one and only real God. Now, and then what truly amazes them is not just that they're seeing these guys with Jesus, but they see them talking with Jesus, and it's pretty clear by how they're talking with him that they're deferring to Jesus, meaning even though there's some pretty important guys in Jewish history, they're treating Jesus as the most important person there. Now, isn't that something? Now, after a while, Peter kind of knocks himself out of his stupor, and he goes over to Jesus and says, "Rabbi, teacher, it's a good thing that the three of us are here. Why don't you let the three of us make some shelters for you? That way you guys can stay and talk longer." Heart's in the right place, Peter, but you're kind of missing the point here. just after Peter finishes saying this, a cloud comes down on top of the mountain, covers everything, and then they hear a voice coming from the mountain. The voice of God. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Do what he says. And it's at this point that Peter, James, and John can't take anymore. They just drop flat on their faces. Not too long after that, they feel someone shoving them on the shoulders, telling them, "Hey guys, come on, get up." They look up and there's Jesus, back to the way they remembered him. No more shine. Moses and Elijah are gone. But they can't deny that they just saw this either. And Jesus says, "Come on, fellas. It's time to head back down the mountain. Let's talk on the way. That way I can explain this to you." Even then, the disciples still didn't quite get what was going on, even though Jesus was trying to show them this is what to expect in the future. This is what to expect coming up real soon. Now, we learn a couple of important lessons here. First one is that just because you don't understand what Jesus is trying to teach you now, doesn't mean you will never understand. Just look at the disciples here. They had this amazing encounter with Jesus, and they had no clue what to make of this until after Easter, until after the first Easter. So if you feel that Jesus is trying to teach you something right now, and you just can't wrap your mind around what that is, don't worry. Even though you might not understand now, don't put it to the side. Just mull it over, come back to it every so often, and sooner or later, he's going to bring you to the moment where everything just clicks. And the other important lesson you need to learn here is that Jesus is our hope and salvation. I mean, that's what Elijah and Moses represented to the Jewish people, especially of Jesus' day. Elijah was a prophet, and while mostly the prophets were telling the people to turn back to God, they were always also preaching that someday God is going to make everything right. They were preaching hope. And Moses delivered the people the law, part of God's plan of salvation, of saving us from our sins. These were the guys that represented hope and salvation to the Jewish people of Jesus' day. But in this instant, they showed that Jesus was greater than either of them. And that means Jesus is our hope and our salvation, no matter how dark things may get. Jesus is our light.